Ethan Miller lay awake in his room, the ceiling fan spinning lazily above him as if mocking his restlessness. The clock on his nightstand blinked 2:04 a.m., each digit a quiet accusation of his insomnia. His apartment was silent, the city outside muted to the occasional hum of a car passing in the distance. Beside him, the bed stretched wide and empty, though he hadn't felt it truly full in months. Sophia's presence in his life had grown thinner, like a shadow in fading light, and the distance between them had settled into his chest like a weight he couldn't lift. His phone lay face down on the dresser, avoiding his own temptation to reread messages from earlier in the evening. Sophia had texted him after another short argument, one of those cyclical disputes that resolved nothing but left them both drained. "We'll talk later," she'd written, as if later were an infinite expanse that could swallow all their unresolved problems. Ethan had typed a long reply but deleted it, his thumb hesitating over words he no longer believed she wanted to hear. It was in that stillness, at the precise moment when sleep seemed just within reach, that a soft knock rattled at his door. Ethan sat upright, heart thudding in his throat. No one ever visited him at this hour. He padded barefoot across the carpet and opened it, the dim hallway light casting a pale frame around the figure standing there. "Caleb?" Ethan's voice came out lower than intended, a mixture of surprise and confusion. Caleb Hayes leaned against the doorway, his familiar grin tugging faintly at his lips but not quite masking the weariness in his eyes. His dark hair was mussed as if he had been pacing or wrestling with thoughts that wouldn't let him rest. He wore a loose hoodie, hands shoved deep into the pockets. "Couldn't sleep," Caleb said softly, glancing past Ethan into the room. "Figured you wouldn't be out cold either." Ethan hesitated for a fraction of a second, then stepped aside. "Come in." The two had been inseparable once, college roommates who had become confidants, partners in reckless adventures, and anchors for each other when life felt uncertain. Their friendship carried a depth that Ethan rarely spoke of aloud, an intimacy born not from romance but from years of proximity, trust, and unspoken understanding. Yet beneath that bond lived something Ethan had never fully named, something that made him both crave and fear moments like this. Caleb dropped into the chair by the window while Ethan returned to sit at the edge of the bed. Neither spoke for a moment. The silence was thick, charged with all the words unsaid over years of quiet observation. Ethan studied Caleb's profile, the curve of his jaw, the way his gaze fixed on the moonlit street below, the way he exhaled as if finally safe. "You look tired," Ethan said, the comment plain but sincere. "Yeah. Haven't had the best week." Caleb's eyes shifted toward him, holding just long enough to make Ethan feel the air grow heavier. "Mind if I crash here for a bit?" Ethan blinked, startled. "On the bed? Where else?" Caleb's grin surfaced again, playful, though his voice carried an undertone Ethan couldn't quite decipher. There was no reason to say no. Yet the request unsettled him, stirring the quiet pool of emotions he tried so hard to keep still. He gave a short nod, sliding back toward the wall to create space. Caleb kicked off his shoes and lay down, settling beside him as though it were the most natural thing in the world. The bed dipped under the weight, closing the distance between them. Ethan felt the warmth radiating from Caleb's body, even through the thin fabric of the blanket that separated them. He stared at the ceiling, forcing his breaths to remain steady, aware of every inch between them, or perhaps, of the lack of inches at all. Caleb shifted slightly, one arm resting above his head. "Remember when we used to stay up all night in the dorms? Talking about nothing, laughing about everything." Ethan smiled faintly at the memory. "We were idiots." "We were honest," Caleb corrected, his voice dropping lower. "Back then, you said things without thinking. Without worrying what they meant." Ethan turned his head, meeting his friend's gaze in the dim light. There it was, the old familiarity, but threaded now with something unspoken. Something that had always lingered in the shadows, waiting. Sophia's face flickered in Ethan's mind, the reminder of the life he was supposed to protect. Yet the thought felt distant here, blurred by the immediacy of Caleb's presence. He hated himself for noticing the way Caleb's lips parted as he spoke, for remembering the countless times he had wanted to ask questions but never dared. "You're quiet," Caleb said, studying him with a half-smile. "Just tired." Ethan forced the word out, though exhaustion had little to do with it. For several minutes, neither spoke. The sound of Caleb's breathing filled the room, a rhythm that pressed closer to Ethan's heart than he wanted to admit. He tried to convince himself that this was nothing more than friendship, that Caleb simply needed comfort, but the logic rang hollow. The truth lived in the way his skin tingled where their arms nearly touched. Ethan shut his eyes, hoping sleep would blur the lines before they crossed. Yet with each passing second, awareness sharpened instead of dulling. He could sense Caleb's closeness like gravity, pulling at him in ways he couldn't escape. "Thanks for letting me stay," Caleb murmured, his voice already softer, more vulnerable. Ethan swallowed, unsure how to respond. He simply whispered, "Always." The word hung in the air, weighted with double meaning neither of them acknowledged outright. Caleb shifted once more, his shoulder brushing Ethan's lightly before settling. It was nothing, an accidental touch, easy to dismiss, yet Ethan's pulse betrayed him, quickening in his chest that he kept his eyes shut, listening to the silence stretch into something thick and dangerous. Questions filled his mind, questions he wasn't ready to ask. Why tonight? Why here? Why did it feel like a line had already been crossed simply by sharing this space? As the minutes passed, Ethan realized sleep would not come. Instead, he lay there caught between fear and temptation, unsure of where this night was leading. The room felt smaller, the air charged, and the future uncertain. When he finally exhaled, it was with the knowledge that something had shifted, something fragile yet irreversible, and with Caleb lying so close, Ethan couldn't help but wonder if this was the beginning of everything, or the end of what he thought he knew. The mattress dipped again as Caleb adjusted his position, rolling slightly onto his side to face Ethan. The movement was small, but to Ethan it felt seismic, a shift that tightened the air between them. His eyes remained fixed on the ceiling, yet he could feel Caleb's gaze pressing against him, steady and unreadable. "You're stiff as a board," Caleb whispered with a crooked smile. "Relax. I'm not going to bite." Ethan let out a dry laugh, though his chest was taut with unease. "That's easy for you to say." "Why?" "Because Sophia might find out I'm here." Caleb's tone was teasing, but beneath it lurked a sharper edge. The mention of her name made Ethan's stomach tighten. "It's not about that. It's just, late. Weird timing." Caleb shifted closer, their shoulders brushing lightly. The contact was fleeting, almost accidental, but it reverberated through Ethan like a struck chord. He wanted to move away, to preserve the fragile line of propriety, yet his body betrayed him by staying rooted in place. "You've always overthought everything," Caleb murmured, his voice softer now. "Sometimes it's okay to just feel." Ethan turned then, meeting Caleb's eyes. They were shadowed by the dim glow of the streetlight filtering through the blinds, but the intensity within them was unmistakable. 1,000 unsaid things swam between them, things that had been building over years of late-night talks, shared secrets, and lingering touches that both pretended not to notice. "I can't," Ethan said finally, the words barely audible. "You can't," Caleb echoed, leaning a fraction closer. "Or you won't?" The question struck harder than Ethan expected. His throat felt dry, and his heartbeat thundered in his ears. Caleb wasn't just asking about this moment, he was asking about every suppressed impulse, every sidelong glance Ethan had buried beneath loyalty and fear. Ethan tried to speak but found no words. Caleb's hand moved, brushing against his under the blanket, an innocent graze on the surface, yet an intentional act beneath it. Ethan's breath hitched. "You don't have to say anything," Caleb whispered. "Just, don't push me away." Ethan shut his eyes, as if darkness might offer safety. But it didn't. The warmth of Caleb's skin seeped into him, an unspoken tether binding them in place. He wanted to deny it, to retreat into the security of his relationship with Sophia, however frayed it had become. Yet every part of him screamed that this electricity, was what he'd been missing. The silence thickened until Ethan could no longer bear it. "Sophia and it's not the same anymore," he confessed, his voice trembling with the weight of the admission. Caleb's expression softened. "I know. I've seen it." Ethan turned his head sharply. "You've seen it?" "I see the way you look when she leaves. The way you drown in thoughts you don't want to share." You don't have to tell me everything, I already know. Caleb's tone was steady, but beneath it lay vulnerability, as if speaking the truth risked unraveling them both. Ethan's pulse surged. The truth hung there, daring him to acknowledge it. He should have ended the conversation, should have stood up, created distance, done anything but remain here in this charged space. Yet he stayed, and that choice said more than any words. Caleb's hand slid more firmly against his now, fingers pressing gently but deliberately. You don't have to pretend with me, Ethan. Not tonight. The room seemed to contract, walls closing in as though forcing them toward inevitability. Ethan inhaled sharply, his body rigid, but he didn't pull away. Caleb's nearness felt both dangerous and intoxicating, like standing on the edge of a cliff with the wind begging him to jump. You're making this complicated, Ethan whispered, though his voice lacked conviction. Caleb gave a faint smile. No. You've always made it complicated. I'm just being honest. The honesty cut deep, unearthing everything Ethan had hidden. The arguments with Sophia, the emptiness creeping into their relationship, the way his heart always steadied when Caleb walked into a room. He realized, with quiet horror, that he had been holding himself together with lies, and Caleb was unraveling them one by one. Minutes stretched, each one tightening the tether between them. Ethan shifted slightly, and in that motion their knees touched beneath the blanket. It was nothing and everything at once, a point of contact that Ethan didn't recoil from. Caleb's voice lowered to a murmur, intimate and fragile. Do you know how long I've wanted to be here like this? Ethan froze, unable to answer. Years, Caleb continued, his eyes never leaving Ethan's. And I've kept it to myself because I didn't want to lose you. I still don't. The confession tore through Ethan's chest. He had suspected, maybe even known deep down, but hearing it out loud made it undeniable. His own feelings, long buried, rose with startling clarity. Ethan swallowed hard, his voice breaking. You shouldn't say that. I had to. Caleb leaned closer, their foreheads nearly touching now. Because if I don't, I'll always wonder if I missed my chance. Ethan's breath shook. He wanted to say this is wrong, to declare loyalty to Sophia, to retreat behind the safe walls of what was expected. But the words refused to form. Instead, he found himself caught in Caleb's nearness, in the way vulnerability flickered across his features, in the way his presence filled every hollow space Ethan had tried to ignore. Their silence spoke louder than any confession. Ethan didn't move, didn't push him away, didn't sever the fragile thread binding them together. And in that stillness, Caleb's hand closed gently over his, sealing the truth Ethan could no longer deny. The moment lingered, delicate yet irrevocable, as though time itself had paused to witness their quiet betrayal. Ethan exhaled slowly, his chest tight with the gravity of what had just shifted. He didn't know where this would lead, only that there was no turning back, and as Caleb's thumb brushed lightly over his knuckles, Ethan understood that the night was no longer about friendship, it was about everything they had buried, now breaking the surface. The pale light of morning crept through the blinds, painting thin stripes across Ethan's bedroom. He blinked against the brightness, disoriented, his body heavy as if weighed down by the night's silence. It took only a moment to register the warmth beside him, the steady rhythm of Caleb's breathing. Ethan froze, unwilling to move, unwilling to confront what reality might look like. Once Caleb opened his eyes, the night replayed in fragments, the closeness under the blanket, Caleb's confession whispered in the dark, the unspoken decision not to pull away. Nothing outwardly scandalous had happened, yet everything within Ethan had shifted. He could no longer tell himself their friendship was untouched. Caleb stirred, stretching lazily before his gaze found Ethan's. His expression was unguarded, vulnerable, as though the night had lifted some invisible mask. Morning, he said softly, voice still husky with sleep. Ethan managed a nod, though words tangled in his throat. He turned slightly, staring at the faint patterns of light on the wall. His chest tightened. It should have been simple to brush this off, to say nothing had changed, that Caleb had just needed company. But the truth lay too close to the surface now, impossible to bury again. Thanks for letting me stay, Caleb murmured, propping himself up on an elbow. His eyes lingered on Ethan's face, searching for a sign, any sign, that the night meant as much to him as it had to Caleb. Ethan swallowed hard. It's fine. I just didn't expect it. Caleb's lips pressed into a faint line. You're thinking about Sophia. The name struck like a stone, and Ethan exhaled slowly. Of course I am. She's my girlfriend. But is she still the person you want to be with? Caleb's question hung heavy, not accusatory but raw, pleading. Because last night didn't feel like a mistake to me. It felt like, finally telling the truth. Ethan sat up, swinging his legs over the edge of the bed. He buried his face in his hands, frustration rising like a tide. You don't get it, Caleb. This isn't just about me. I can't throw everything away because of one night. One night? Caleb's voice tightened. You think this is just one night? Ethan, you've known it's been more than that for years. You felt it too, you just won't admit it. The words struck deep because they were true. Ethan remembered every glance, every subtle brush of contact, every unspoken moment that had lingered longer than it should. He had felt it, and denying it now was impossible, but so was admitting it. His phone buzzed on the dresser, shattering the fragile silence. Ethan glanced at the screen, Sophia's name illuminated in bright letters. A text message, "Good morning. Can we talk later today?" His chest tightened as he read it. The duality of his life pressed in on him, Sophia's steady presence on one side, Caleb's unspoken promise on the other. He felt suspended between them, unable to step fully into either world without destroying the other. Caleb watched him, his jaw tense. She doesn't see you the way I do. Don't say that, Ethan muttered, though even to himself it sounded weak. She doesn't. Caleb's voice steadied, though his eyes glistened with restrained emotion. She doesn't notice when you're lost in thought. She doesn't hear the way you hold back when you laugh. She doesn't know how much you carry inside, Ethan, but I do. I always have. Ethan turned, meeting Caleb's gaze. The sincerity there was overwhelming, almost unbearable. For a fleeting moment, he wanted to surrender, to let Caleb's words carry him into a life where honesty mattered more than appearances, but fear clawed at him, fear of betrayal, of consequence, of the unknown. You can't say these things, Ethan whispered. Not when I'm still with her. Caleb's expression faltered, his confidence unraveling into something more fragile. Then tell me what I'm supposed to do. Pretend last night didn't happen. Pretend I don't feel this way about you. Ethan's silence was answer enough. Caleb exhaled sharply and stood, pulling his hoodie over his head. The sudden absence of his warmth sent a chill through the room. I should go, he said, his voice clipped, though it trembled beneath the surface. Ethan rose halfway, reaching out instinctively before stopping himself. His hand hovered in the air, suspended between impulse and restraint. Caleb shook his head. Don't. If you're going to stay with her, then don't give me pieces of something you'll never give fully. I can't. His voice broke, and he turned toward the door. The room felt hollow as Caleb's footsteps retreated. The door clicked shut, leaving Ethan in suffocating quiet. He sat back on the bed, his body sinking under the weight of everything unsaid. The striped light on the wall shifted with the morning sun, marking the passage of time he could not slow. His phone buzzed again, another message from Sophia, asking when he was free. Ethan stared at it, his chest aching with the contradiction of his life. He thought of Caleb's hand over his, of the certainty in his eyes, of the way the night had cracked open something Ethan had tried so hard to ignore. For the first time in years, he doubted the path he was on. The safety of his relationship with Sophia felt like a cage, while the uncertainty with Caleb felt like air, dangerous, unpredictable, but alive. That he pressed the phone face down on the bedspread and buried his face in his hands. His heart pulled in two directions, neither one offering peace, and as the morning brightened around him, Ethan realized that no matter what choice he made, something inside him had already changed forever. The night had planted a seed he could no longer uproot, and the silence Caleb left behind was louder than any confession.